I stuffed the last of my camera equipment into the bag and checked my phone. 11 missed calls from the parking enforcement office. My stomach dropped before I even read the text message. Vehicle towed from hotel loading zone. Retrieve within 24 hours or additional fees apply. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I'd been so focused on getting decent shots at the corporate event that I hadn't noticed the time. The hotel manager had been explicit about the 30-minute loading zone limit, and I'd been there for 3 hours. Professional photography doesn't pay enough to cover stupidity. Riley tugged at my jacket, her small face pinched with exhaustion. "Mama, I'm hungry." "I know, baby. We'll get something soon." Outside the hotel's glass doors, water poured from the sky in sheets. Not the gentle autumn drizzle that had been falling when we arrived, but the kind of downpour that soaks you to the bone in seconds. The kind that turns city streets into rivers and makes taxi drivers disappear. I pulled out my wallet and counted what was left after paying this month's overdue electric bill and last month's late fee for Riley's daycare. $43. The towing fee alone would be $200, plus storage, plus the original parking ticket. I didn't have it. Wouldn't have it until my next client paid, which could be days or weeks depending on their accounting department's mood. "Mama?" Riley's voice was small, tired. She'd been patient all evening, sitting quietly in the corner of the ballroom while I worked, coloring in the activity book I'd brought. She was always patient, my girl. Too patient for a 5-year-old who should be home in pajamas, not standing in a hotel lobby at 9 p.m. on a school night. "Let's find somewhere dry to wait," I said, trying to sound confident. "The rain will stop soon." The lie tasted bitter. The weather app showed another 2 hours of this storm, minimum. Across the street, a cafe glowed with warm light. The kind of place with marble countertops and $12 lattes, where people in expensive coats sipped espresso and pretended the world outside didn't exist. Normally, I'd never go in there. But Riley was shivering despite her jacket, and I needed to call someone. Anyone. The cafe was packed when we pushed through the heavy door. Every table occupied, every chair claimed. Warmth hit my face along with the rich aroma of coffee and something baking. Riley pressed against my leg, overwhelmed by the noise and the crowd. I scanned the room desperately. One table near the back had a single occupant, a man with dark hair reading what looked like an Italian newspaper. He hadn't touched the espresso cup in front of him. Desperation overrides pride. I'd learned that the hard way. I approached his table, water still dripping from my jacket. "Excuse me. I'm sorry to bother you, but would you mind if we sat here? Just until the storm passes. Everywhere else is full." He looked up, and I found myself caught by the darkest brown eyes I'd ever seen. Not black, but deep amber brown, like expensive whiskey held up to light. His face was all sharp angles, strong jaw shadowed with precisely maintained stubble, high cheekbones that suggested Italian heritage. No scars, no imperfections, just the kind of masculine beauty that belonged on magazine covers, not in New York cafes at 9 p.m. He was younger than I'd expected from the back. Mid-30s, maybe. Tall, even sitting down, easily over 6 feet, with the kind of athletic build that came from actual physical work, not just gym sessions. His gaze moved from me to Riley, taking in her wet blonde curls plastered to her small face, the way she trembled despite being inside. "Sit," he said. Not a question. A command, but spoken softly. His accent was barely there, just a slight musicality to the word that confirmed the Italian newspaper wasn't for show. I pulled out the chair across from him, helping Riley into the one beside me. She was too quiet, which meant she was either exhausted or coming down with something. Please not sick. I couldn't afford sick. The man folded his newspaper with precise movements and raised one hand. Immediately, a waiter appeared, moving faster than I'd seen any server move in my life. "Hot chocolate for the girl," the man said, still looking at Riley. "Extra marshmallows. And soup, something warm. Tomato if you have it." "Right away, Mr. DeLuca," the waiter said, already backing away. "Wait, I didn't order—" I started, but the man's attention had shifted back to me. "She's cold," he said simply. "And hungry." It wasn't a question, and the truth of it stung. Yes, My daughter was cold and hungry because I couldn't afford to get our car out of impound, couldn't afford a taxi in a storm, couldn't afford anything beyond survival most months. Thank you, I managed. But I can pay for our... Already handled. He leaned back slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Not threatening, exactly, but absolute. Like he was used to being listened to. Obeyed. You were working tonight. The corporate event upstairs. How did he know that? I glanced down at my clothes, realized my camera bag was still visible, logo facing out. The hotel name was probably on something. Yes. Photographer, freelance. I tried to sit straighter, aware of how I must look. Soaked jacket, hair falling out of its ponytail, mascara probably smudged. Professional. I could tell. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. You have the look. Always watching. Always framing. The waiter returned with frightening speed, setting down a mug of hot chocolate so loaded with marshmallows that Riley's eyes widened. A bowl of soup followed, steam rising from the surface. Eat, Piccola, the man said to Riley, his voice gentler than it had been with me. Riley looked at me for permission. I nodded, and she immediately grabbed the mug with both hands, bringing it to her lips carefully. I'm Megan, I offered, feeling like I should at least introduce myself to the stranger buying my daughter dinner. Megan Collins. This is Riley. Julian, he replied. Julian DeLuca. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it suggested it should, like he was testing whether I'd recognize it. I didn't. I was too busy watching Riley drink her hot chocolate, seeing color return to her cheeks, feeling the knot in my chest loosen slightly. You live in the city? Julian asked, making conversation that felt oddly formal. Queens. We were just waiting for the rain to stop before heading home. His eyes moved to the window, where water still poured in torrents. You'll be waiting a while. Yeah. I pulled my phone out, checked it again. Still no response from my friend Sarah, who might have been able to lend me money. No miraculous solution to the towing situation. Just the weather app confirming my misery. Julian watched me, missing nothing. I had the unsettling feeling he could read exactly what was wrong, could see the calculations I was running in my head. Car impound versus paying rent. Taxi home versus walking in the storm. My camera bag sat at my feet, and something shifted in Julian's expression when he looked at it. You dropped this, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out one of my business cards. The corners were slightly damp. The professional headshot I'd paid too much for 3 years ago staring back at me. I didn't remember dropping it, but my bag had spilled earlier when I'd rushed to get a shot of the CEO cutting a cake. Oh, thank you. I've been looking for a photographer, Julian said, setting the card on the table between us. For a family event. Nothing corporate. More personal. I blinked. What kind of event? My mother's birthday, a dinner party. 60 guests, maybe more. I'd need someone for the evening. Candid shots. Some formal portraits. He paused. I looked at your portfolio online. Your work is good. Natural. Not overdone. He'd looked me up. Based on a dropped business card. Within the hour. That's very flattering, but I'm sure there are more established photographers who... I prefer your style. Again, not a request. A statement of fact. The event is in 10 days. I can offer an advance on the booking if that would help with scheduling. 10 days. That was fast, but not impossible. And an advance meant money now, which I desperately needed. What kind of advance? The question came out more blunt than I intended, but subtlety felt pointless. Julian named a figure that made my breath catch. It was more than I usually charged for an entire event, and he was offering it up front. That's generous, I said carefully, suspicion creeping in. Very generous for a photographer you just met. I make decisions quickly. His gaze held mine, and I pay well for quality work. Is that a problem? Yes, screamed every instinct I'd developed over the past 2 years of struggling alone. When something seems too good to be true, it is. When strange men offer money, they want something in return. When opportunities fall into your lap, they're usually traps. But Riley was drinking hot chocolate, warm and safe, And I owed $200 to get our car back and had $43 to my name. No, I heard myself say. Not a problem. Julian pulled out his phone, tapped something, then looked back at me. I'll need your number. My driver will pick you up tomorrow to see the venue, discuss specifics. I gave him my number, watching as he entered it with the same precise movements he'd used to fold his newspaper. Everything about him was controlled, measured. The advance will be transferred tonight, he said. You should see it in your account by morning. You don't even have my banking information. Your business card has your website. Your website has your payment portal. He said it like it was obvious, which it was, but it still felt invasive. Like he'd already looked too deeply, learned too much. The soup bowl in front of Riley was half empty, and she was starting to slump in her chair, exhaustion winning over hunger. We should go, I said, even though the rain hadn't let up. Let you have your table back. I'll drive you. I started to refuse automatically, but Julian was already standing, pulling on a black coat that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. I stopped myself from making the comparison, from cataloging the obvious wealth gap between us. It didn't matter. This was business. That's not necessary. I tried anyway. It's pouring. You have no car. You have a tired child. He stated facts, not arguments. I have a car and a driver. It's practical. He wasn't wrong, and my options were limited to non-existent. I nodded, too tired to keep fighting. Julian walked to the counter, spoke briefly with the man behind it. Money changed hands, though I didn't see how much. When he returned, he held Riley's jacket, which had been hanging on her chair. Come, Piccola, he said quietly, helping Riley into the jacket with surprising gentleness. Time to go home. Riley looked up at him with sleepy curiosity. Are you a prince? The question caught him off guard. For the first time since we'd sat down, his expression shifted into something almost human, almost warm. Why would you think that? He asked, crouching to be at her eye level. You're in a castle, Riley said, waving vaguely at the elegant cafe. And you're helping us. Like in stories. Julian's mouth curved into a genuine smile, and it transformed his entire face. Made him look younger, less intimidating. Not a prince, he said. Just someone who doesn't like seeing people cold and hungry. Outside, a black car waited at the curb. Not a taxi, not an Uber. A sedan with tinted windows and a driver who appeared the moment we stepped onto the sidewalk, holding an umbrella. The driver opened the rear door without speaking, his movements efficient. He was built like a wall, broad-shouldered and solid, with the kind of watchful eyes that suggested military or security background. I hesitated at the car door, some primal part of my brain screaming warning. Getting into cars with strangers. Rule number 1 of staying safe in the city. But Riley was already climbing in, drawn by the dry warmth, and Julian was waiting patiently, rain soaking his shoulders. I got in. The interior smelled like leather and something woody, expensive. Cedar, maybe, or sandalwood. Julian slid in beside me, maintaining a careful distance, while Riley curled up on the far seat, her head already drooping. The driver pulled away from the curb smoothly, and we merged into the sparse late-night traffic. I gave him my address in Queens, and if he found it unimpressive compared to wherever Julian DeLuca lived, he didn't show it. The silence in the car felt heavy. I stared out the window, watching the city blur past, trying to make sense of the evening, trying to convince myself this was normal, just a lucky break. Nothing more complicated. Julian didn't speak, didn't pull out his phone, didn't do anything but exist in the space beside me with that same controlled stillness. Halfway through the drive, Riley's small voice broke the quiet. Do princes have castles? Julian glanced at her, then at me, something like amusement in his dark eyes. Some do, he told her. Do you have a castle? Something like that. Riley absorbed this information seriously. Mama says castles aren't real anymore, that they're just in books. Your mother is very wise, Julian said. But he was looking at me now, not Riley. But sometimes reality surprises us. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. The car pulled up to my building 40 minutes later, the rain finally starting to ease. It looked exactly like what it was. A worn-down apartment complex in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Graffiti on the walls, broken security light, trash collecting in corners. Julian's expression didn't change as he took it in, which somehow made it worse than if he'd shown disgust. "Thank you for the ride," I said, gathering Riley, who had fallen fully asleep. "And for dinner. And for the job. You didn't have to do any of it." "Tomorrow at 10, Julian said instead of acknowledging my gratitude. "The driver will be here." "I'll be ready." I carried Riley to the building entrance, her weight familiar and comforting against my chest. At the door, I turned back, some impulse making me look. Julian hadn't driven away. He sat in the back of the car, visible through the window, watching. Making sure I got inside safely, I realized. The realization did something strange to my chest. Loosened something that had been tight for months. I waved once, awkwardly, then pushed through the door into the lobby that smelled like mildew and old cooking oil. By the time I got Riley upstairs, changed her into pajamas, and tucked her into bed, it was past 11. I checked my phone one last time before collapsing onto my own bed. A notification glowed on the screen. Bank deposit. The exact amount Julian had promised, already transferred. I stared at it for a long moment, at the proof that tonight had been real, that tomorrow I could get my car back, that for at least a little while the desperate scramble to survive could ease. But underneath the relief, a question nagged at me. Why? Why had Julian DeLuca, whoever he was, decided to help a random photographer and her daughter in a cafe? What did he really want? I fell asleep before I could answer, exhaustion claiming me. Tomorrow I would meet him again, see his castle, whatever that meant. Tomorrow I could start worrying about the price of his generosity. Tonight, Riley was warm and fed and safe. I'd take that victory, however temporary it might be. The morning came too quickly. Riley bounced on my bed at 8, fully dressed and demanding breakfast, which told me she'd recovered from last night's exhaustion. Kids were resilient like that. I, on the other hand, felt like I'd been hit by a truck. My phone showed the bank deposit was real, which meant today was real, which meant I was about to see Julian DeLuca's castle and figure out what I'd actually agreed to. By 9:45, we were both presentable. Riley wore her favorite purple dress with the butterfly on it, insisting that you had to dress nice for castles. I'd chosen black jeans and a gray sweater, professional but not trying too hard. My camera equipment was clean and organized, ready to assess the venue. The black sedan arrived at precisely 10. Same car as last night, same driver who emerged to open the door with the same wordless efficiency. "Good morning," I ventured as Riley climbed in. "Morning, Miss Collins," he replied, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone built like a linebacker. "I'm Anthony. Mr. DeLuca asked me to make sure you're comfortable." Anthony. At least now the silent driver had a name. The drive took us out of Queens, through Manhattan, across a bridge I didn't recognize. We ended up in a part of the city I'd never visited, where streets were tree-lined and houses sat behind gates instead of stacked on top of each other. We turned onto a private road, and I understood what Riley had meant about castles. The DeLuca property wasn't a castle, but it wasn't far off. A 3-story brick mansion sat at the end of a curved driveway, surrounded by manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a year. Wrought iron gates had opened automatically as we approached, cameras visible at multiple points along the perimeter. This wasn't just wealthy. This was the kind of wealth that needed security. "Wow," Riley breathed, pressing her face against the window. Anthony pulled up to the front entrance where Julian waited. He wore dark gray slacks and a black sweater that somehow looked both casual and expensive, hands in his pockets as he watched our approach. He opened Riley's door himself, crouching down to her level. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" Riley nodded shyly, suddenly reserved in daylight. "Good." Julian straightened, his attention shifting to me as I climbed out. "Megan, thank you for coming. Thank you for the advance," I replied, keeping it professional. "It cleared this morning, as promised." He gestured toward the house. "Come. I'll show you where the event will be, and we can discuss what you'll need." The interior matched the exterior. High ceilings, crown molding, hardwood floors that gleamed like glass. Artwork that looked original and probably was. Everything screamed old money, generational wealth. the kind that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Julian led us through a formal living room that looked like it belonged in a museum, down a hallway lined with family photographs. I tried not to stare too obviously at the images. Julian as a teenager, serious even then. An older couple who must be his parents. A younger man who shared Julian's features but with softer edges, less intensity. We emerged into a sunroom that overlooked gardens stretching toward a distant wall. Windows on 3 sides flooded the space with light, and I could already see the potential for photographs. Natural light like this was a gift. "The dinner will be here," Julian explained. "Tables arranged in a U-shape, about 60 guests. My mother prefers intimate settings even for large gatherings." I pulled out my phone, started making notes about lighting conditions, best angles, where I could position myself to be unobtrusive. Professional mode kicked in, overriding my nerves about being in this overwhelming house. Riley had wandered to the windows, drawn by movement in the garden. I followed her gaze and saw an older woman in an elegant cream dress tending to rose bushes, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back. The woman looked up, perhaps sensing being watched. Her eyes found the window, found Riley standing there backlit by sunlight, and she went completely still. Even from this distance, I could see the shock on her face, then something else. Recognition, maybe, or memory. Her hand went to her mouth. "That's my mother," Julian said quietly, having moved to stand beside me. His voice had changed, softened. "Valentina." The woman set down her gardening shears and walked toward the house with purpose. Julian moved to meet her, and I heard the back door open, followed by rapid Italian that I couldn't understand. Valentina entered the sunroom like weather, bringing energy that filled the space. She was beautiful in the way women who'd lived full lives were beautiful, lines around her eyes speaking of laughter and tears in equal measure. But she wasn't looking at Julian. She was looking at Riley, who'd turned from the window and now stood uncertain, sensing the intensity of attention. "Mio Dio," Valentina whispered. "She looks exactly—" "Mother," Julian said gently, switching to English. "This is Megan Collins, the photographer I told you about, and her daughter Riley." Valentina blinked, seemed to remember herself. She turned to me, offered a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, which kept drifting back to Riley. "Forgive me," she said, her accent stronger than Julian's. "You must think me strange. It's just, you remind me of someone, Kara." This last part was directed at Riley. "My granddaughter," Julian supplied quietly, answering my unasked question. "Sophia. We lost her 10 years ago." The weight of that statement settled over the room. I looked at Riley, seeing her through Valentina's eyes. Blonde curls, small frame, probably the same age. The same innocence that made the world seem safe when it wasn't. "I'm so sorry," I said, inadequate words for immeasurable loss. Valentina waved it away, but her eyes were bright. "It was long ago, but seeing your daughter," she trailed off, then seemed to gather herself. "You will stay for lunch, yes? Both of you, I insist." Julian opened his mouth, probably to explain that we were here for business, but Valentina's expression brooked no argument. This was a woman used to getting her way. "We don't want to impose," I started. "You're not imposing. You're accepting hospitality." Valentina's smile became genuine. "Please. It would make me very happy." Riley looked up at me hopefully. She'd been so good lately, so patient with all the upheaval in our lives. "One lunch wouldn't hurt." "Okay," I agreed. "Thank you." Valentina beamed, then held out her hand to Riley. "Come, Piccola, you can help me set the table. Do you know how to fold napkins?" Riley shook her head but took Valentina's hand without hesitation. My daughter, who was usually shy around strangers, following this elegant woman like they'd known each other forever. I watched them go, feeling something twist in my chest. "She's safe," Julian said, reading my tension. My mother would die before letting harm come to a child in her care. The phrasing was odd, specific, like he'd considered exactly that scenario. "Tell me about Sophia," I said, instead of addressing that strangeness. Julian moved to the windows, looking out at the garden. She was 4, my brother Christopher's daughter. There was an incident, a territorial dispute with a rival organization. Sophia was caught in the crossfire. Rival organization. Not rival company, not competing business. Organization. The word choice confirmed what I'd started suspecting last night. What kind of business are you in, Julian? He turned to face me, expression unreadable. Import and export, logistics, security consultation, various interests. All technically legitimate, all vague enough to mean anything. And the organizations you have disputes with? Competitors who don't believe in civilized negotiation. His tone made it clear the topic was closed. Come, let me show you the rest of the venue while my mother commandeers your daughter. We spent the next 30 minutes discussing lighting, timeline, shot lists. I tried to focus on the work, to ignore the way Julian's presence seemed to fill whatever room we were in. He was attentive to details, asked intelligent questions about composition, and candid versus posed shots. He also, I noticed, always positioned himself between me and doorways, always kept track of exits, always seemed aware of every sound in the house. This was a man who lived expecting danger. A crash from somewhere in the house made us both turn. Raised voices followed, one of them slurred and angry. Julian's entire demeanor changed. The polite host vanished, replaced by something colder, harder. Stay here. He left before I could respond, moving with purpose toward the commotion. I absolutely did not stay there. I followed, keeping distance but needing to know what was happening, where Riley was. The voices led to a formal dining room where Valentina stood with rigid posture, Riley behind her, and a younger man swayed in the doorway. He had Julian's coloring but softer features, less defined, handsome in a boyish way, though that effect was ruined by bloodshot eyes and rumpled clothes that suggested he'd slept in them. She's replacing her, the man slurred, pointing at Riley. You're replacing Sophia with some random kid off the street. Christopher, Valentina said, voice sharp as a blade. You're drunk. At noon. Again. So this was the brother. The one who'd lost his daughter. So what? Christopher laughed bitterly. At least I feel something. At least I'm not pretending everything's fine, having birthday parties and playing happy family with strangers. Julian appeared in the doorway behind Christopher, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Out, Julian said. One word. Quiet, but absolute. Christopher spun, nearly lost his balance. Oh, big brother's here. Come to throw me out of the house our father left to both of us? Father left the house to me. He left you an allowance you've drunk through twice over. Julian's voice was flat, factual. You have 30 seconds to leave on your own, or Anthony will help you. As if summoned, Anthony appeared at Julian's shoulder. Christopher took in the bigger man's impassive expression and seemed to deflate. This is what we've become, Christopher said, looking between Julian and Valentina. Father would be ashamed. Father would be ashamed of what you've made yourself, Valentina replied, sadness underlying the anger. Now go. Sleep it off. Christopher left, stumbling slightly. Anthony followed at a discreet distance. The silence that followed was heavy. Riley had pressed herself against Valentina's legs, and the older woman stroked her hair absently, comforting them both. Julian's jaw was tight, hands fisted at his sides. This was costing him, I realized. Watching his brother self-destruct, being unable to fix it. I'm sorry you had to see that, Valentina said to me to Riley. Christopher, he's been unwell since we lost Sophia. 10 years. The girl had been gone 10 years and her father was still drowning in grief. We should go, I said quietly. This is family business. We're intruding. No. Valentina's response was immediate. Firm. You stay. We eat lunch like civilized people. Christopher doesn't get to ruin this too. It wasn't really a request. I nodded, not knowing what else to do. Lunch was surprisingly pleasant despite the earlier scene. Valentina had made pasta from scratch, served with bread that melted in your mouth and vegetables from the garden. Riley ate without complaint, drawn out of her shell by Valentina's gentle attention and questions about school, friends, favorite colors. Julian remained quiet, watchful. He'd positioned himself where he could see both the door and Riley, that protective instinct on full display. Midway through the meal, Valentina asked, Would you do me a favor? An old woman's indulgence? Of course, I said, though wariness crept in. Would you take a photograph of Riley? For my desk? Valentina's eyes were hopeful, vulnerable. I know it's odd to ask, but she has brought light into this house today, and I would like to remember it. I looked at Riley, who shrugged, unbothered. Sure, Mama. Okay, I agreed, pulling out my camera. Riley, stand by the window there. I took several shots of my daughter backlit by garden sunlight, her blonde curls glowing, expression open and sweet. When I showed Valentina the preview, the older woman's eyes filled with tears. Perfect, she whispered. Grazie. After lunch, Julian walked us to the car. Riley ran ahead with Anthony, chattering about the roses in the garden. I apologize for Christopher, Julian said as we walked the curved driveway. He's complicated. He lost his daughter. That's not complicated, that's devastating. It is, but it doesn't excuse everything else. Julian stopped walking, turned to face me. Megan, I want you to have my number, my personal line, not the business one. He pulled out his phone, showed me a different number than the one from last night. I added it to my contacts, wondering why a photographer would need the personal line of a client whose family drama included day drinking and mysterious organizations. If you ever need anything, Julian continued, and I mean anything, you call that number, day or night. It doesn't matter what it is. Julian, I appreciate the generosity, but I'm your photographer. That's all. His dark eyes held mine, intense in a way that made my breath catch. Riley reminds my mother of what we lost. That makes you family adjacent, whether you intended it or not. And I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in that statement should have alarmed me. Instead, it made something warm unfurl in my chest, unwanted and dangerous. I'll keep that in mind, I managed. Anthony had the car running, Riley already buckled in. Julian opened my door, waited until I was settled. I'll send you the final details for the event, he said. And Megan? Thank you. My mother smiled today, genuinely. She hasn't done that in longer than I care to admit. The door closed before I could respond, and we pulled away from the mansion, from the gardens, from the man who'd somehow become more than a client in less than 24 hours. Riley talked nonstop about Valentina, the house, the pasta. I made appropriate noises, my mind elsewhere. On the way out, just before reaching the gates, I'd seen something. Men unloading wooden crates from a truck, Cyrillic lettering visible on the sides. Russian markings, unless I was mistaken. Import and export, Julian had said. But what kind of importing required that level of security, that kind of secrecy? I didn't ask. Didn't want to know the answer, because knowing would mean I'd have to make a choice about whether to keep taking Julian DeLuca's money, keep accepting his protection. Riley was safe, well-fed, happy. I had work, income, breathing room for the first time in months. Sometimes ignorance was the better option. Anthony dropped us at home 20 minutes later. As I carried Riley upstairs for her nap, my phone buzzed. A message from Julian. My mother wants to know if Riley would like to come back for dinner this week. No work obligations, just family time. Let me know. I stared at the text for a long moment. Crossing lines, getting involved, letting my daughter attach to people who lived in a world I didn't understand. All the logical reasons to decline lined up in my head. But I thought of Valentina's smile, genuine and warm, of Julian's quiet protection, of Riley laughing for the first time in weeks. Thursday works, I texted back. His response was immediate. Thursday, it is. I'd worry about consequences later. For now, I'd take the light where I could find it, even if it came from a source I couldn't fully trust. The week between that lunch and Valentina's birthday party passed in a blur of work and anxiety. Riley asked daily when we'd see Valentina again, and I couldn't quite explain the knot in my stomach every time Julian's name came up in conversation. Thursday arrived with clear skies, and my camera equipment meticulously organized. Anthony picked us up at 6, Riley dressed in her butterfly dress again, chattering about whether there would be cake. There will definitely be cake, Miss Riley, Anthony said, the first time I'd heard him volunteer information. Mrs. DeLuca's favorite. Chocolate with raspberry filling. The mansion looked different at night. Lights illuminated the facade, making it glow against the darkening sky. Cars lined the circular drive. Expensive models I couldn't name but recognized as the kind that required six-figure investments. Julian met us at the entrance, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been built around his body. Probably had been. His dark eyes swept over us, lingering on Riley for a moment before settling on me. "You came," he said, as if there'd been doubt. "You're paying me to," I replied, keeping it professional. "Where would you like me to start?" "My mother wants to see Riley first. Then you can begin shooting." He gestured inside, where voices and music drifted from deeper in the house. "The guests are arriving." Valentina appeared almost immediately, resplendent in a midnight blue dress that probably cost more than my car had. Her face lit up when she saw Riley, and my daughter ran to her without hesitation. "Cara mia," Valentina said, embracing Riley. "Come, I want you to meet some people. Your mama will work, but you stay with me, yes?" Riley nodded enthusiastically, and they disappeared into the crowd before I could protest. Julian must have seen the concern on my face. "She's safer with my mother than anywhere else in this house. Valentina will guard her like a treasure." There was something in his tone, a weight to the words that suggested he meant it literally. I pulled out my camera, adjusted settings for the indoor lighting, and started working. The sunroom had been transformed into an elegant dining space. 3 long tables formed a U-shape, set with crystal and silver that caught the light from dozens of candles. Flowers I couldn't name spilled from centerpieces, their scent subtle but present. The guests were arriving in clusters. Men in dark suits, women in cocktail dresses and jewelry that didn't come from department stores. They moved with the easy confidence of people who'd never worried about money, never counted pennies to afford groceries. But underneath the elegance, I started noticing things. The way certain men positioned themselves near exits. The bulges under jackets that weren't from wallets. How conversations would pause when I moved close with my camera, resuming only after I'd passed. These weren't business executives or wealthy socialites. Or rather, they were those things. But they were something else, too. I captured candid shots of guests mingling, of Valentina laughing with an older woman, of the tables being filled with dishes that made my mouth water. Through my viewfinder, I watched how people deferred to Julian. Not obviously, not obsequiously, but with respect that bordered on wariness. He wasn't just the host. He was someone they didn't dare cross. The dinner itself was elaborate, course after course, wine flowing freely, toasts in Italian and English. I moved around the perimeter, trying to be invisible while documenting everything. Riley sat beside Valentina at the head table, eating carefully and clearly on her best behavior. During the main course, I caught movement through a doorway. Christopher stood in an adjacent room with 2 men I didn't recognize. Their body language was wrong, tense and confrontational. I shifted position, trying to appear like I was just looking for a better angle while keeping them in my peripheral vision. Christopher's voice carried despite obvious attempts to keep it low. "The shipment from the Russians is late. 3 days now. Kozlov is getting impatient." Russians, Kozlov, shipment. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The security, the deference, the careful vagueness about Julian's business. "Import and export," he'd said. But not the legal kind. One of the men with Christopher noticed me. His expression hardened, and he said something sharp in Italian. Christopher's head snapped toward me, and for a moment our eyes met. I turned away immediately, heart hammering, and focused my camera on the dessert being served. Act natural. Act like you heard nothing, saw nothing. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze. I went through the motions, capturing the cake being brought out with its candles, Valentina's delighted expression, the group singing in Italian. But my hands shook slightly, adrenaline making my pulse too fast. Julian DeLuca wasn't just wealthy. He was exactly what every instinct had been warning me about since that first night in the cafe. He was Mafia. And I'd walked my daughter straight into his world. After the cake, guests began mingling again. I found Riley still with Valentina, now helping the older woman open presents. My daughter was safe, happy, completely oblivious to the revelation currently tearing apart my carefully maintained composure. The photographs, Julian's voice came from behind me, making me jump. Are they satisfactory? I turned, camera clutched like a shield between us. They're fine. Good lighting, emotional moments. Your mother will be pleased. He studied me with those dark, penetrating eyes. But you're not pleased. I'm just the photographer. My opinion doesn't matter. You're a terrible liar, Megan. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. What did you see? No point in pretending. Your brother, talking about Russians and shipments, using words that don't fit the legitimate business narrative. Julian's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't look surprised. And what conclusion have you drawn? That I should finish this job and never come back? My voice came out steadier than I felt. That I should take Riley and maintain as much distance as possible from whatever this is. Something flickered in his expression. Not anger, but something colder. Resignation, maybe. Come with me, he said. We should talk privately. I wanted to refuse, wanted to grab Riley and run. But Anthony had appeared at the edge of my vision, and Valentina still had my daughter. I wasn't leaving without her, and making a scene would only make things worse. I followed Julian through the house to the same office I'd glimpsed on my first visit. He closed the door behind us, muffling the party sounds. Sit, he said, gesturing to a leather chair. I remained standing. I'll finish the job. I'll deliver the photos. But after that, I think it's best if Riley and I don't come back. Is that what you think? Julian moved to his desk, poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. He held one out to me. You think you can just walk away? Forget what you've seen? Forget this place exists? I don't know anything, I said, not taking the glass. I overheard a conversation I didn't understand. That's all. You're smarter than that. He set the glass down within my reach. You know exactly what you saw. What we are. What I am. The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Then let me go, I said quietly. I won't say anything. I have no reason to. I just want to keep Riley safe and live our lives. Julian leaned against his desk, regarding me steadily. Are you afraid of me now? Afraid I'll hurt you or Riley? I should have lied. Should have said no, minimized the threat. Instead, truth spilled out. Yes, I'm afraid. Not that you'll hurt us directly, but that being anywhere near you puts us in danger we can't survive. He nodded slowly, as if I'd confirmed something. Good. Fear is healthy. It means you understand the reality of my world. So you'll let us go? I didn't say that. He picked up his own glass, swirled the liquid. You've been in my home twice now. You've seen my family, my associates. You know where I live, what kind of security I maintain. You've photographed faces of men who prefer anonymity. Cold dread settled in my stomach. So what? I'm a security risk? You're going to make sure I disappear? Don't be dramatic. Julian took a sip of his drink. I'm saying you're connected to me now, whether you like it or not. And that means you're under my protection. I don't want your protection. You have it anyway. His tone left no room for argument. The world I operate in. Knowledge is leverage. People might try to use you to get to me. Or your daughter. That's not a threat from me, that's reality. So you accept my protection. Or you put yourself at risk trying to refuse it. I wanted to argue. To tell him he was wrong. But the cold logic made horrible sense. What does that mean, practically? I managed. It means you have my number. You use it if there's ever a problem. Any problem. It means Anthony or someone else will occasionally check on you. Make sure you're safe. It means that if anyone ever threatens you or Riley, you call me immediately. And in return, you live your life. You work. You raise your daughter. You do whatever makes you happy. He set down his glass. The only requirement is discretion about what you've seen here. But I don't think that will be a problem. It was a cage, but a gilded one. Protection that doubled as surveillance. Kindness that carried obligation. I need to get Riley, I said. Not agreeing, but not refusing either. It's late. Julian moved to the door, opened it. I'll have Anthony bring the car around. Your payment is in an envelope on the entry table. There's a bonus included. I followed him back to the party, which had thinned but not ended. Valentina still had Riley, now showing her a photo album. When she saw us approaching, the older woman's expression turned knowing. "It's time for us to go," I said, keeping my voice gentle. "Say goodnight to Valentina." Riley hugged Valentina with the easy affection of a child who didn't understand complications. "Thank you for my cake. Come back soon, Piccola," Valentina said, kissing Riley's forehead. Then she looked at me, and something in her eyes suggested she knew exactly what conversation Julian and I had just had. "Both of you." Outside, the night had grown cold. Riley climbed into the back seat of the waiting car, immediately curling up. She'd fall asleep before we left the driveway. Julian held my door open, waiting. Before I got in, he spoke quietly. "You asked me to tell you about Sophia." I paused, half in the car. She was Christopher's daughter. 4 years old, blonde curls like Riley. His voice was carefully controlled, emotion locked down tight. 10 years ago, I had a territorial dispute with a Russian organization, the Kozlov family. They wanted our port operations. I refused to negotiate. He looked past me, at nothing. They retaliated by targeting a restaurant we owned. Sophia was there with her mother for lunch. The gunman didn't care about collateral damage. Sophia died instantly. Her mother survived but never recovered. She killed herself 2 years later. I felt cold despite my jacket. Julian. I was 24. I'd just taken over from my father 6 months earlier. I thought I was invincible, that my name alone would protect my family. His eyes met mine, and the pain there was raw, real. I learned otherwise, and I swore I would never, ever let anyone in my care be vulnerable again. The implication was clear. Riley reminded them of Sophia. Valentina had lost her granddaughter. Julian had lost his niece and sister-in-law. And now we were here, inserted into that wound. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, because nothing else seemed adequate. "Don't be sorry. Be careful. Be smart. And call me if you ever need help." He stepped back, allowing me to close the door. Through the window, I watched him stand there as Anthony pulled away. Still watching, still protecting, even as we left. Riley slept the entire drive home. I carried her upstairs, tucked her into bed, and then sat in my living room staring at the envelope Julian had given me. Inside was the agreed payment, plus a substantial bonus. Also a business card with just his personal number, no name. I should have been relieved. Should have felt like I'd escaped something dangerous. Instead, I felt marked, claimed, protected whether I wanted to be or not. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "Thank you for tonight. My mother is happy. That matters to me." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "You're welcome." Nothing else seemed safe to say, because the truth was complicated and dangerous, and I didn't fully understand it myself yet. I'd walked into Julian DeLuca's world, thinking I was just a photographer. Now I knew I was something else entirely. What that meant, I'd discover soon. 3 weeks passed without contact from Julian, beyond a brief text thanking me for the photos. Valentina called twice, asking when Riley could visit again, but I kept making excuses. Distance felt safer, necessary. Then the letter arrived. Plain white envelope, prison postmark from upstate. My hands shook as I opened it, already knowing who it was from before I saw Ryan's handwriting. "Megan, my lawyer says I'll be out in 2 weeks. Early release for good behavior. We need to talk about Riley. She's my daughter too. My family has hired representation to file for shared custody. You can't keep her from me. See you soon. Ryan." The words blurred as panic flooded my system. Ryan, getting out, coming for Riley. I'd spent 8 months believing distance and prison walls kept us safe. 8 months rebuilding our lives without looking over my shoulder. And now he was coming back. Riley was at kindergarten. Wouldn't be home for another 3 hours. I had time to figure this out. Time to breathe. Except I couldn't breathe. I called the legal aid office I'd used when filing the original restraining order. Got transferred 4 times before reaching someone who could help. "Custody cases are complicated," the attorney said, her voice professional but not unkind. "Especially when the father has financial resources. Does he? His family does. They never approved of me. They'll pay whatever it takes." Then you need proper representation. Our office handles criminal matters, but custody requires specialized lawyers. I can give you some referrals, but they're not cheap. How not cheap? Retainer starts around $15,000. More if it goes to trial. $15,000. I had maybe $3,000 in savings from Julian's jobs. Not even close. I thanked her and hung up, then spent the next hour calling the referrals. Every conversation ended the same way. Without a substantial retainer, no one would take my case. Ryan's family money meant this would be a fight, and fights cost resources I didn't have. By the time I picked Riley up from school, I'd exhausted every option I could think of. My daughter climbed into our car, chattering about finger painting and playground politics, oblivious to the crisis swirling around her. "Mama, why are your eyes red?" "Just tired, baby." I forced a smile. Long day. At home, I made dinner mechanically. Mac and cheese from a box, carrot sticks, apple slices. Riley ate while I pushed food around my plate, my mind racing through impossible scenarios. Ryan would get shared custody. Or worse, full custody. He had money, family support, a clean record since his release would prove rehabilitation. I had a restraining order based on incidents from 2 years ago and a job photographing events. No judge would see us as equal. After putting Riley to bed, I sat in my living room staring at my phone. At the contact labeled Julian DeLuca, personal. I shouldn't call. Getting more entangled with him was dangerous, stupid. I should handle this alone, but Riley's face kept flashing through my mind. Her trusting smile, her small hand in mine, the way she still sometimes had nightmares about the shouting matches before we left. I couldn't let her go back to that. My finger pressed the call button before I could change my mind. Julian answered on the second ring. Megan. Just my name, spoken in that low, controlled voice. Somehow it steadied me. "I need help," I said, the words catching in my throat. I wouldn't call if there was any other option. But there isn't. And Riley, slow down. What happened? I told him about the letter, the custody threat, the lawyers who wouldn't take my case without money I didn't have. The words spilled out in a rush. 2 weeks of fear and uncertainty I'd been suppressing finally breaking through. Julian listened without interrupting. When I finished, silence stretched for several seconds. "Your address," he said finally. "Right now." "What?" "Tell me your address. I'm coming to you." I rattled off the street and apartment number, too tired to argue. 30 minutes, Julian said. "Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone but me." He hung up before I could respond. 28 minutes later, headlights swept across my window. I peered through the blinds to see the black sedan pulling up, Julian emerging from the back seat with Anthony close behind. I opened the door before they could knock, not wanting Riley woken. Julian stepped inside, his presence immediately making my small apartment feel smaller. His eyes swept the space, cataloging exits and sightlines with practiced efficiency, before settling on me. "Where's Riley?" "Asleep. She doesn't know about any of this." "Good." He moved to my couch, sat like he belonged there. "Show me the letter." I handed it over, watching as he read Ryan's words with an expressionless face. Anthony stood by the door, hands clasped, waiting. "Anthony," Julian said without looking up. "Place someone on this building. Rotating shifts. If Ryan or anyone connected to him comes within 2 blocks, I want to know immediately." "Yes, sir." Anthony pulled out his phone, stepped into the hallway to make calls. "Wait," I protested. "You can't just station people outside my apartment. The neighbors will notice." Your landlord works for a property management company I do business with. It won't be a problem." Julian set the letter aside. "And your neighbors won't notice. My people are professionals." The casual way he rearranged my life should have infuriated me. Instead, I felt something loosen in my chest. Someone was taking control, handling things I couldn't handle alone. "What about the custody case?" I asked. "Guards outside won't stop a court order." "No, but lawyers will." Julian pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts. "I have a firm on retainer, family law specialists. They handle sensitive matters for my associates." "Julian, I can't afford—" "You're not paying." He held up a hand, cutting off my protest. This is personal. Riley reminds my mother of Sophia. More than that, she's brought light back to Valentina's life. That makes her important to me. I can't accept charity. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. It's not charity. It's protection. Do you understand the difference? I did. Charity implied kindness without strings. Protection meant obligation, ownership. What do you want in return? Julian studied me for a long moment. Honesty. If Ryan contacts you again, you tell me immediately. If anything threatens Riley, you call me before anyone else, including the police. Why not the police? Because the police have procedures, paperwork, delays. I don't. His voice was soft but absolute. Riley's safety is too important for bureaucracy. Anthony returned, nodding to Julian. Done. Martinez is already en route. Chang takes over at midnight. Good. Julian turned his attention back to me. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. My lawyers will meet you at their office. Anthony will drive you. I have a job. A client shoot at 11. Cancel it. I can't just... Megan. Julian leaned forward, his gaze intense. Your ex-husband is threatening to take your daughter. Everything else is secondary. Cancel the shoot. Anthony will take you to the lawyers. They'll handle the paperwork. And we'll shut down Ryan's custody claim before it gains traction. The certainty in his voice, the absolute confidence that he could fix this, made me want to believe him. Made me want to surrender control and let someone stronger handle the fight. Why are you doing this? I whispered. Really? Not the explanation about Valentina or Sophia. Why do you care what happens to us? Julian sat back, considering the question. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. When Sophia died, I was young and arrogant. I thought my position, my name, would be enough protection. I learned otherwise. My niece paid for my mistakes with her life. His jaw tightened. I swore I'd never let that happen again. That anyone under my protection would have every resource, every advantage I could provide. But we're not under your protection. Not really. We're just people you met in a cafe. You became mine the moment I decided you were. Simple statement. No room for argument. Whether you accept it or not doesn't change the reality. Riley is safe because I've decided she's safe. You're protected because I've decided to protect you. The possessiveness should have terrified me. Instead, exhaustion and relief made me slump forward, elbows on my knees. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just trust me. Julian stood, buttoned his jacket. Get some sleep. Anthony will be here at 9 tomorrow. Be ready. He moved toward the door, then paused. From his pocket, he pulled a phone, different from the one I'd seen him use before. This is for you. It has one contact programmed in. Anthony's direct line. If you need immediate help, you call him. He'll have someone here in minutes. Or he'll come himself. I took the phone. Felt its weight in my palm. Another leash. Another connection to Julian's world. What if Ryan's lawyers are better than yours? The question came out small, vulnerable. Julian's expression softened slightly, the dangerous edge receding. They won't be. Trust me on this. Ryan might have family money, but I have resources he can't imagine. By the time my lawyers finish, he'll be lucky if supervised visitation is still an option. After they left, I checked on Riley. She slept peacefully, one hand curled under her cheek, blonde hair spread across her pillow. My daughter. My whole world. The reason I'd fled, survived, rebuilt. And now she was the reason I'd tied myself to a man whose protection came with invisible chains. I climbed into bed but couldn't sleep. Instead, I stared at the phone Julian had given me. At the single contact labeled, Anthony, Emergency. And wondered what price I'd eventually pay for accepting this help. The answer came sooner than I expected. But not in the way I'd feared. The week following my meeting with Julian's lawyers felt surreal. They'd moved with frightening efficiency, filing counter motions before Ryan's attorneys had even officially served papers. I'd sat in their glass-walled conference room while 3 sharp-eyed lawyers in designer suits explained how they'd systematically dismantle Ryan's custody claim. His early release doesn't erase his record, the lead attorney, a woman named Victoria Hale, had said with cold precision. We'll argue that releasing him early only proves he can follow institutional rules, not that he's fit to parent. the documented domestic violence, the restraining order, the 8 months of zero contact with his daughter. It paints a clear picture. By the end of the meeting, I'd felt cautiously optimistic for the first time since receiving Ryan's letter. Now, 2 weeks later, the custody process churned forward through paperwork and legal maneuvers. Julian's lawyers assured me Ryan's case was weakening daily. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the constant weight of panic crushing my chest. Julian visited frequently, always with a reason. Updates from the lawyers, checking that Anthony's security rotations were unobtrusive, dropping off groceries because Valentina insists you're too thin. Each visit felt carefully calibrated, professional boundaries maintained even as something unspoken hummed between us. Riley adored him. That was the most dangerous development, watching my daughter light up whenever his car appeared. She'd started asking when Mr. Julian would visit again, counting days between his appearances. One evening, he arrived with Italian children's books, colorful illustrations of castles and dragons. She should learn the language, he explained, settling onto my worn couch as Riley climbed beside him. It's part of her heritage now, being connected to my family. I'd opened my mouth to argue that we weren't really connected, that this arrangement was temporary protection. But Riley was already sounding out Italian words under Julian's patient guidance, and the protest died unspoken. Over the following weeks, Julian taught Riley basic phrases. Buongiorno for good morning, grazie for thank you, ti voglio bene, which he translated as, I care about you, though I knew enough Italian to recognize it meant something closer to, I love you. Riley practiced constantly, greeting Anthony in Italian when he arrived for security checks, telling me buonanotte at bedtime. She was 5 years old and already bilingual, thanks to a man who'd entered our lives by accident. Or had it been accident? I'd started wondering about that first night in the cafe. The convenient job offer, the perfectly timed advance. Julian had admitted to investigating me after finding my business card. How much had been chance and how much calculation? The thought should have disturbed me more than it did. Sunday morning, 3 weeks after the lawyers' meeting, Valentina called. Lunch today, she announced, brooking no argument. 1 o'clock. Julian will send Anthony. It's family tradition. Sunday lunch. Your family now. Valentina, we're not really your family because I say your family. Now dress comfortable. We eat in the garden when weather is nice. She hung up before I could protest further. Anthony arrived at 12:30. Riley wore her purple butterfly dress again, declaring it her going to see Nonna outfit. When had Valentina become Nonna instead of Mrs. DeLuca? The mansion looked different in afternoon sunlight, less imposing. Gardens bloomed with late spring flowers, and I could hear voices and laughter from somewhere in back. Julian met us at the door, dressed more casually than I'd ever seen him. Dark jeans, a gray Henley that clung to his shoulders, no jacket. He looked younger, more approachable. They're in the garden, he said, gesturing us through. Warning, my mother invited half the neighborhood. Sunday lunches get extensive. The garden had been transformed into an outdoor dining room. A long table covered in white cloth stretched across the patio, already laden with platters of food. 30 people milled around, talking and laughing in a mix of Italian and English. Children ran through the flower beds, their shrieks of joy cutting through adult conversation. Valentina appeared, resplendent in a coral dress, and swept Riley into a hug. There's my beautiful girl. Come. The other children are playing by the fountain. Riley hesitated, looking back at me. Julian crouched beside her. It's safe, he said quietly in Italian, then translated. My men watch the walls. No one comes in who shouldn't. Go play. Riley nodded, trusting him completely, and ran off with a girl near her age who'd appeared at Valentina's side. She trusts you, I observed, watching my daughter disappear into the garden. Children have good instincts. Julian straightened. Come. I'll introduce you to everyone, though most won't remember your name after today. Italian families are large and loud. He wasn't wrong. Over the next hour, I met cousins and uncles and family friends whose relationships I couldn't track. Everyone spoke with their hands, voices overlapping in cheerful chaos. Food appeared in endless waves, antipasti, pasta, grilled meats, vegetables drizzled in olive oil, bread still warm from the oven. Through it all, Julian stayed close, not hovering, but present, introducing me as Megan, a friend of the family, with his hand resting briefly on my lower back or shoulder, casual touches that felt like claims. During the meal, I noticed Christopher at the far end of the table. He was sober today, or close to it, picking at his food while watching Julian with undisguised bitterness. When Julian threw his head back, laughing at something Valentina said, Christopher's expression twisted into something ugly. "Don't mind him," a woman beside me murmured. Julian's cousin, I thought, though I'd lost track. Christopher's been angry at the world since Sophia died, especially angry at Julian for surviving the grief better. After lunch, as guests lingered over coffee and dessert, Julian found me watching Riley play with the other children. "Want to get out of here?" he asked quietly. "The chaos gets overwhelming. Won't your mother mind? She'll be delighted. She's been trying to get me alone with you for weeks." The admission made heat rise to my face. Julian noticed, something that might have been amusement flickering in his dark eyes. "Ice cream," he said. "There's a place Riley will love." 20 minutes away, Riley was thrilled at the prospect, bouncing in the back seat of Julian's car, a different vehicle than the usual sedan. This one a dark blue SUV with leather seats and technology I didn't understand. The gelato shop was small and family-owned, tucked into a neighborhood that felt frozen in another era. Julian knew the owner by name, spoke to him in rapid Italian, while Riley pressed her face against the glass display case. "She wants to try everything," I translated, smiling at my daughter's indecision. "Then she'll try everything," Julian replied simply, ordering a sampler of 6 flavors. We sat at an outdoor table, Riley methodically working through her gelato, while Julian and I pretended not to watch each other. The afternoon sun was warm, the street quiet. It felt almost normal, like we were just a family enjoying weekend ice cream. Except we weren't a family. We were a single mother, her daughter, and a man whose protection came with obligations I hadn't fully acknowledged. Riley's eyes grew heavy halfway through her second flavor. The long afternoon, the playing, the rich food. It all caught up to her at once. Julian noticed before I did. "Come on, Piccola," he said gently. "Time for a rest." He carried her to the car, settled her in the back seat where she immediately curled up and fell asleep. Instead of driving home, Julian pulled into a small park nearby and killed the engine. "She'll sleep better if we don't move," he explained, turning in his seat to face me. "We can wait." In the sudden quiet, with my daughter sleeping peacefully behind us, the barriers I'd maintained crumbled slightly. "Why are you really doing all this?" I asked, not demanding, just needing to understand. "The lawyers, the security, the Sunday lunches, were nothing to you." Julian's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through his usual control. "When I was 17, he said slowly, I had a younger sister, Bella. She was 13, just starting high school. Beautiful, brilliant, full of life. Past tense. My chest tightened. There was a dispute with a rival family. The Russians, actually. The same ones my brother mentioned at my mother's party. They wanted territory my father controlled. He refused to negotiate. Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white. They retaliated by targeting Bella. Grabbed her after school, held her for 3 days. By the time we found her, he stopped, throat working. She didn't survive what they did to her. Horror and grief crashed over me. "Julian, I'm so sorry. My father became someone else after that. Ruthless, paranoid, trusting no one. I watched him destroy himself trying to protect what remained of our family. He died 5 years later, heart attack from the stress. Left me in charge at 22. He turned to look at me directly, dark eyes blazing with intensity. I swore I would never let anyone under my protection suffer what Bella suffered, that I would use every resource, every advantage, to keep my people safe. And then Christopher's daughter Sophia died in that restaurant shooting. Despite all my promises, the weight of that guilt, carried for 10 years, was visible in every line of his face. So yes, I'm protecting you and Riley. But it's not charity. It's penance. It's trying to save someone I can save, when I couldn't save the ones I lost. Without thinking, I reached across the console and took his hand. His fingers closed around mine immediately, grip almost painful in its intensity. "You can't save everyone," I said quietly. "Those deaths weren't your fault, weren't they? I'm the one who holds power now. If I'd been stronger, smarter, more ruthless, you'd be your father. Dead at 47 from the stress of trying to control the uncontrollable." Julian stared at our joined hands, then lifted his gaze to mine. Whatever he saw in my expression made his breath catch. "You're not afraid of me. I should be. You terrify me, but not for the reasons you think." "What reasons, then?" I couldn't say it. Couldn't admit that what terrified me was how much I'd come to depend on him, how safe I felt in his presence, how my daughter called his mother Nonna and learned Italian from him and looked for his car every afternoon, how I'd started falling for a man whose world would eventually consume us. Instead, I leaned across the console and kissed him. Julian went completely still for one heartbeat. Then his free hand cupped the back of my head, and he kissed me back with an intensity that stole my breath. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was claiming, demanding, 10 weeks of tension finally breaking free. I tasted desperation in that kiss. His and mine both. Two people who'd been alone too long, finding temporary refuge in each other. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against mine. "This complicates things," he said roughly. "I know. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Maybe I get to decide what I deserve." He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. "If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be mine in ways that go beyond protection. Do you understand that? The possessiveness should have sent me running. Instead, it sent heat through my veins." "I understand." Julian kissed me again, softer this time, before reluctantly pulling away. "I should take you home. Riley needs her bed, not a car seat." The drive back was quiet, charged with unspoken promises and acknowledged complications. At my building, Julian walked us to the door despite Anthony's presence nearby. "I need a few days," he said, as Riley stumbled sleepily toward the elevator, "to handle some business that's been building. Anthony will maintain security, and the lawyers have everything under control. Is it dangerous, this business?" "It's always dangerous, but I'll be careful." He brushed his thumb across my cheek. "Call me if you need anything. I mean it." After they left, I carried Riley to bed and then stood at my window, watching the street below where one of Julian's men maintained watch from a discreet distance. I'd crossed a line today, acknowledged feelings I'd been denying, accepted that whatever was happening between Julian and me was more than convenience or protection. The question was what price we'd both pay for that acknowledgement. The text came at 3:47 in the afternoon, while I was editing photos from a wedding shoot. A video file, no words attached. My finger hovered over the screen, some primal instinct warning me not to open it. But mothers don't have the luxury of ignoring potential information about their children. I pressed play. Riley sat tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Gray walls, concrete floor stained with God knows what. Her blonde curls were tangled, tear tracks cutting through the dirt on her small face. Someone had put duct tape across her mouth, and her eyes were wide with terror barely contained. The camera zoomed closer, and I could see her chest heaving with panicked breaths through her nose. She was trying so hard to be brave. Below the video, text appeared in Cyrillic characters, followed by a rough English translation. "DeLuca has 12 hours. Port access or the girl dies." The phone fell from my shaking hands onto the table. Riley. My baby. My entire world, taken by monsters who saw her as nothing more than leverage. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think beyond the image of her terrified face, the ropes cutting into her small wrists, the certainty that she was calling for me in her mind. My hands found the phone again, fumbling to dial Julian's number. It rang once before he answered. "Megan, they have her." My voice broke on the words. "The Russians. They sent me a video. She's tied up and scared, and they're going to kill her if you don't—" "I know." His voice was deadly calm. I received the same video 2 minutes ago. Where are you? Home. I'm at home. Julian, they're going to hurt her. They won't. Steel underneath the words. Not while she's valuable. Listen to me carefully. Lock your door. I'm sending Anthony to get you. 10 minutes. Pack nothing, just wait. I can't just wait. Megan. He cut through my rising hysteria. Every second you spend panicking is a second we're not moving. Trust me. I will get her back. The line went dead. I paced my small living room like a caged animal, checking the window every 30 seconds. 8 minutes later, Anthony's car screeched to a stop outside. I was down the stairs before he could get out. Where is she? I demanded, climbing into the passenger seat. We're working on it. Anthony pulled into traffic with controlled urgency. Julian's already mobilizing the team. The drive to Julian's mansion took 17 minutes that felt like 17 hours. My mind kept showing me that video on repeat. Riley's terrified eyes, the ropes, the cold warehouse. What were they doing to her right now? Was she crying? Screaming? Did she think we'd abandoned her? The mansion gates were already open when we arrived. Multiple vehicles crowded the circular drive, men in dark clothes moving with military precision. Julian met me at the door. He'd changed into tactical gear, black cargo pants, and a fitted shirt under body armor. His expression was carved from ice. Come, he said, leading me through the house to a room I hadn't seen before. The operations center looked like something from a spy movie. Banks of computer monitors covered one wall, displaying satellite imagery, traffic cameras, heat signatures. Half a dozen men worked at keyboards, voices overlapping in rapid-fire Italian and English. Valentina stood in the corner, rosary beads clutched in her weathered hands, lips moving in silent prayer. Show me, Julian ordered. One of the technicians pulled up the video I'd received. Julian watched it once, face expressionless, then gestured for the tech to freeze on a frame showing the warehouse interior. Background details, he said, pointing. That window configuration. The rust pattern on those pipes. Cross-reference with known Russian holdings in Newark. On it, the tech replied, fingers flying across the keyboard. Julian turned to me. The video was sent 40 minutes ago based on metadata. They're following standard kidnapping protocol, establishing control before making demands. They want your ports. I forced the words past my tight throat. Are you going to give them what they want? No. Simple. Absolute. Because if I negotiate, Riley becomes a template. Every enemy I have will know they can take what's mine to force compliance. She's not yours. The protest came automatically. His dark eyes met mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Yes, she is. The moment I decided she was. And more importantly, she's yours. That makes this non-negotiable. One of the monitors flashed. Boss, I've got something. 3 warehouses in Newark match the window configuration. Running thermal imaging now. We watched as satellite feeds appeared, showing heat signatures in and around the buildings. The first 2 showed normal activity patterns. The third showed something different. There, the tech zoomed in. 12 heat signatures inside, clustered defensive positions. One smaller signature separated from the group. My heart lurched. That's her. That has to be her. Julian studied the screen with a focus that was almost predatory. Timestamp on when they gathered there? First activity spike was 4:32 this afternoon. The tech reported. Matches our timeline. Want me to confirm with traffic cam footage? Do it. 3 minutes later, we had confirmation. A dark SUV with obscured plates had been caught on camera entering the warehouse district at 3:58, 12 minutes after Riley's school dismissal. That's our target. Julian turned to address the room. Alpha team preps for immediate deployment. Beta team maintains perimeter once we breach. No one leaves that building alive except our people and the girl. The casual way he ordered executions should have horrified me. Instead, I felt savage satisfaction. These men had taken my daughter. They deserved whatever was coming. I'm going with you, I said. No. She's my daughter, which is exactly why you're staying here. Julian's tone brooked no argument. You're emotionally compromised. You'd be a liability in the field. Riley needs her mother alive, not caught in crossfire. Then what am I supposed to do? Sit here and watch? Yes. He moved closer, lowering his voice. You watch every screen. You see the moment we secure her. And when this is over, when she's safe, you're the first face she sees. Not mine. Yours. The logic was sound even as everything in me screamed to go to her. I nodded jerkily. Julian touched my shoulder briefly, the only concession to comfort he'd allow himself. Then he was all business again, issuing rapid commands to his team. 15 minutes later, a convoy of 4 black SUVs left the property. I watched them go through the window, then returned to the operations center where multiple screens now showed dashboard cameras from the vehicles. Valentina appeared at my side with a glass of water I didn't remember wanting. He will bring her home, she said quietly. My son does not fail when family is at stake. She's not his family. She is the child my son protects. That makes her DeLuca, whether papers say so or not. Valentina squeezed my hand. And you, Megan, you are also family now. These men took what is ours. They will learn why that was a mistake. The convoy reached the warehouse district as dusk fell. Through night vision cameras, I watched Julian's team stack up at multiple entry points. His voice came through the speakers, calm and controlled. Thermal shows no change in positions. They're not expecting us yet. Alpha breaches in 60 seconds. All teams confirm ready. A chorus of affirmatives. My fingernails dug into my palms hard enough to break skin. 30 seconds. Weapons free on confirmed hostiles. Priority 1 is locating the child unharmed. Priority 2 is intel. Priority 3 is nobody leaves breathing. I stopped breathing myself. Breach. The world exploded into chaos. Multiple camera feeds showed doors being kicked in simultaneously. Muzzle flashes lighting the darkness, shouted commands in English and Italian. The staccato crack of gunfire filled the speakers. One camera, mounted on Julian's helmet, showed his point of view as he moved through the warehouse with lethal efficiency. 2 men appeared from behind a stack of crates. Julian fired 3 times. Both dropped. North corridor clear, someone reported. East side, 2 tangos down, another voice. Office section ahead, Julian said. Heat signature still there. Hasn't moved. Please let her be okay. Please let her be alive. The helmet camera showed Julian approaching a closed door. He signaled to the men behind him, held up 3 fingers. 3, 2, 1. The door exploded inward. Julian swept into the room, weapon raised. For a heart-stopping moment, the camera showed nothing but overturned furniture and shadows. Then it tilted down. Riley sat in the corner exactly as she'd appeared in the video, tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth. But her eyes, when they found the camera, went wide with recognition. Target acquired, Julian said, his voice rougher than before. She's alive. She's okay. A sob tore from my throat before I could stop it. Valentina's arm went around my shoulders as my knees buckled. On screen, Julian holstered his weapon and crossed to Riley in 3 long strides. His hands, so deadly moments before, were gentle as he peeled the tape from her mouth. Riley, he said softly. It's me. You're safe now. She stared at him for 1 long second, like she couldn't believe he was real. Then she threw herself forward, chair and all, trying to reach him. Julian caught her, wrapping his arms around chair and child together. One of his men moved in with a knife, cutting the ropes. The moment she was free, Riley wrapped her arms around Julian's neck and buried her face against his tactical vest. I knew you'd come, she sobbed. I told them you'd come. They said nobody was coming, but I knew. I'm here. Julian's voice cracked in a way I'd never heard. I've got you, Piccola. Nobody's going to hurt you ever again. He stood with her clinging to him. This violent man holding my terrified daughter with infinite care. Alpha team, target secured, he reported, moving to extract. The journey out of the warehouse was faster than the entry. Julian never put Riley down, just carried her through corridors of fallen men, shielding her face so she wouldn't see the bodies. Mama? Riley's voice came through the audio. Where's my mama? She's waiting for you, Julian promised. She's safe. We're going to her right now. The convoy pulled back through Newark with escort vehicles clearing their path. 45 minutes from breach to arrival at the mansion. 45 minutes during which I paced the foyer like a mad woman, unable to sit, unable to do anything but wait. Headlights swept across the windows. Car doors opened. I was already running down the front steps when Julian emerged from the lead vehicle, Riley still in his arms. "Mama!" she screamed, reaching for me. I grabbed her from Julian and crushed her against my chest, feeling her small body shake with sobs, breathing in the smell of her hair and sweat and fear. But alive. She was alive. "I'm here, baby," I whispered fiercely. "I've got you. You're safe." Riley clung to me, fingers twisted in my shirt, her whole body trembling. I held her so tightly she had to push back to breathe, but I couldn't let go. Couldn't convince my arms to loosen even slightly. Julian stood a few feet away, watching us with an expression I couldn't fully read. Relief, certainly. But underneath it, something darker. Guilt, maybe. The weight of promises made and nearly broken. Valentina appeared with a blanket, wrapping it around Riley's shoulders, even though the night wasn't cold. "Povera bambina," she murmured, tears streaming openly. "You're home now. You're safe." A doctor Julian had summoned arrived minutes later and checked Riley over in the mansion's sitting room. No injuries beyond some bruising from the ropes and mild dehydration. Physically, she'd emerged intact. Emotionally was another question. Riley wouldn't let go of me. When the doctor needed to examine her arms, she screamed until I held her hand. When Valentina tried to bring her hot chocolate, she buried her face against my neck. "It's okay," I kept saying, knowing it wasn't but needing to say something. "You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you." After the doctor left and Valentina had coaxed Riley into drinking some water, Julian appeared in the doorway. Riley's head snapped up. For a moment I thought she'd be afraid, would associate him with the trauma. Instead, she reached for him. "Mr. Julian saved me," she said to me, like I might not know. "The bad men said nobody was coming, but he came anyway." Julian crossed the room and crouched beside us. "I told you I'd protect you. I keep my promises." "I know." Riley's small hand found his. "Can we stay here tonight? I don't want to go back to our apartment." She didn't say why, but I knew. The apartment was where she'd been taken from in her mind, even though the actual abduction happened at school. It represented vulnerability now. "Of course," I said before Julian could answer. "We'll stay as long as you need." Julian's eyes met mine over Riley's head. In that moment, I understood that something had fundamentally shifted between us. He'd gone to war for my daughter, had killed for her, had risked everything to bring her home. How did I walk away from that? How did I maintain distance from a man who'd proven beyond doubt that he'd burn down the world to keep us safe? The answer was simple and terrifying. I couldn't. "The guest room is prepared," Julian said quietly. "Top of the stairs, second door on the right. Whatever you need. Ask Valentina or Anthony." Riley was already falling asleep against my shoulder, the adrenaline finally crashing. I carried her upstairs, Julian trailing behind us like a silent guardian. The guest room was beautiful and comfortable, but more importantly, it had a lock on the door and windows that opened onto nothing but a sheer wall. Safe. I laid Riley in the enormous bed and crawled in beside her. She immediately curled against me, one hand fisted in my shirt. Julian stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, looking like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "Thank you," I finally said, "for bringing her home, for everything." "Don't thank me." His voice was rough. "This happened because of me, because I made you visible, because they knew taking her would hurt me. You saved her. After putting her in danger in the first place." He scrubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion and guilt etched into every line. "Megan, tomorrow," I interrupted. "Whatever you need to say, we'll deal with tomorrow. Tonight she's home and safe. That's all that matters." He nodded slowly, then stepped back into the hallway. "Lock the door. Anthony's posted outside. Nobody gets in without going through him first." After he left, I did lock the door. Then I held my daughter and listened to her breathe until exhaustion finally claimed me too. Tomorrow would bring questions, consequences, and decisions I wasn't ready to make. But tonight, Riley was alive in my arms, and I'd never forget the sight of Julian DeLuca carrying her out of that warehouse like she was the most precious thing in his world, because I was starting to realize that to him, she was, and so was I. Riley woke screaming at 2 a.m. I'd been dozing fitfully beside her, hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. The moment her cry pierced the darkness, I was awake, pulling her against me. "It's okay, baby. You're safe. I'm here." She sobbed into my shoulder, small body shaking. "They're going to come back. They said they'd come back if Mr. Julian didn't do what they wanted. They're not coming back." I stroked her tangled hair, trying to sound confident. Mr. Julian made sure of that. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Julian had rescued her, but he'd admitted one man escaped. Kozlov himself, probably. The head of the snake still slithering free. A soft knock at the door made me tense. "Megan?" "It's Julian." I carefully extracted myself from Riley's grip and opened the door. Julian stood in the hallway wearing dark sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair disheveled like he'd been lying down but not sleeping. Anthony hovered behind him. I heard her scream. Julian said quietly, "Is she okay?" "Nightmare." I glanced back at Riley, who'd curled into a ball on the bed. "She thinks they're coming back." Something dark crossed Julian's expression. "May I come in?" I hesitated, then nodded and stepped aside. Julian moved to the bed, sitting carefully on the edge. Riley's eyes opened, puffy and red from crying. "Piccola," he said gently. "Can I tell you something?" She nodded, fingers twisted in the blanket. "The men who took you, they're gone. Not just away. Gone. They can't hurt you or anyone else ever again." "All of them?" Her voice was so small. "All but one." Julian's honesty surprised me. "And he's running very far away because he knows what happens if he comes back. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Riley studied his face with a child's unsettling directness. "You killed them." I started to protest, to shield her from that reality, but Julian spoke first. "Yes," he said simply. "I did. Because they hurt someone under my protection. That's what happens when people threaten my family." "Am I your family?" Julian's throat worked. "If you want to be." Riley considered this, then nodded. "Okay, then I'm not scared anymore." Just like that. The resilience of children, accepting protection from the monster who destroyed other monsters on her behalf. Julian tucked the blanket around her, then stood. "Try to sleep. Anthony's outside the door. I'm down the hall. Nothing gets past us." After he left, Riley settled back against me. Within minutes, her breathing evened out into genuine sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, processing what had just happened. Julian had admitted to killing men in front of my 5-year-old daughter, and instead of being horrified, she'd found comfort in it. What kind of world had we entered where violence was reassurance? Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through heavy curtains. Riley woke calmer, asking for breakfast with something approaching normalcy. We found our way downstairs to discover Valentina already in the kitchen, preparing what looked like enough food for an army. "Buongiorno," she said warmly, pulling Riley into a hug. "How did you sleep, Kara?" "Better after Mr. Julian came." Riley climbed onto a stool at the kitchen island. "He said the bad men are gone forever." Valentina's eyes met mine over Riley's head, understanding passing between us. "Yes, well, Julian is very good at making sure bad people don't bother his family." Over pancakes and fruit, Riley gradually relaxed. She told Valentina about the warehouse, about being scared, about how she'd known Julian would come because he'd promised. I let her talk, watching color return to her cheeks, seeing her process the trauma in the way children do, direct and matter-of-fact. Julian appeared around 10, freshly showered and dressed in dark jeans and a gray Henley. He looked less like a Mafia boss and more like a dangerously attractive man who happened to command an army. "Can I borrow your mama for a few minutes?" he asked Riley. She looked at me for confirmation. I nodded. "Stay with Valentina. I'll be right back." Julian led me to his office and closed the door. The room felt different in daylight, less intimidating. Maps still covered one wall, but now I could see they showed port layouts, shipping routes, territory markers. "We need to talk about what happens next," Julian said, moving to lean against his desk. What happens next is we go home and try to rebuild some normalcy. You can't. No apology in his voice, just statement of fact. Your apartment isn't secure. Anyone who knows where you live knows where to find you. And Kozlov is still out there. You said he's running. For now. But men like him don't forget. They don't forgive. Riley is a loose end, and so are you. He crossed his arms. Until I eliminate the threat permanently, you're staying here. You can't just order us to live with you. I'm not ordering. I'm stating reality. His dark eyes held mine. Do you want to take Riley back to that apartment and wonder every time you hear footsteps in the hallway if it's him? Wonder if the car following you is surveillance or attack? Second guess every stranger on the street? The scenarios he painted made my stomach clench. Because he was right. I'd never feel safe there again. How long? I asked. However long it takes. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He moved closer. Megan, I know this isn't what you wanted. But that video they sent you, that was the opening move, not the endgame. Kozlov wants to hurt me, and he knows the best way to do that is through people I care about. We're not your responsibility. Yes, you are. Firm. Absolute. I made you mine when I decided to protect you. That's not something I take lightly or walk away from halfway. The possessiveness in his words should have made me angry. Instead, exhaustion won out. What about Riley's school? My work? We have lives, Julian. Riley transfers to a private academy with better security. I know the headmaster. He owes me favors. You can work from here. The house has a studio space you can convert for photography. He'd clearly thought this through. Or you can take a break from working while Riley recovers. I'll cover expenses. I don't want your money. Then consider it compensation for the danger my world brought to your doorstep. His voice softened slightly. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you alive. A knock interrupted before I could respond. Anthony entered without waiting for permission. His expression grim. Boss, we've got a problem. Julian straightened immediately. What kind? Christopher. Anthony pulled out his phone, showed Julian something on the screen. Security footage from the warehouse. He was there. The blood drained from Julian's face. Show me. Anthony pulled up the footage on Julian's computer. Grainy night vision showed the warehouse from an exterior angle. Timestamp read 3 hours before the kidnapping. A figure approached the building, walked to a side door. The camera angle caught his profile as he glanced back. Christopher DeLuca. Julian's hands curled into fists. When was this taken? Day of the kidnapping. 12:48 p.m. Anthony's voice was carefully neutral. He was there before Riley was taken. Before we even knew she was missing. He set it up. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Your brother helped them kidnap her. Not just helped. Julian's voice had gone deadly quiet. He probably provided the intel. School schedule, security gaps, pickup procedures. Everything they'd need to take her cleanly. Valentina appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Giuliano, tell me I didn't just hear what I think I heard. Julian turned to his mother. Christopher betrayed us. He gave the Russians the information they needed to take Riley. No. Valentina shook her head. Rosary beads clutched tight. No, he wouldn't. Not after Sophia. He knows what it's like to lose a child. That's exactly why he'd do it. Julian's jaw was tight. He wants me to feel what he felt. Wants me to understand the pain of watching a child disappear. He's sick, Valentina protested. He's broken. He doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. Julian pulled out his phone. Anthony, where is he now? Last known location was the apartment downtown, the one you set up for him after he moved out. Send a team. Bring him here. Giuliano, no. Valentina moved between him and Anthony. He's your brother. He put Riley in danger. He allied with the people who killed his own daughter. Julian's voice cracked slightly. He's not my brother anymore, Mama. He's a threat. The pain in Valentina's eyes was unbearable to watch. Please, let me talk to him first. As his mother, one conversation before you do whatever you're planning. Julian's expression was stone, but after a long moment he nodded once. One conversation. Then he answers for what he's done. 2 hours later, Christopher was brought to the mansion. Not in handcuffs, not restrained, but flanked by Anthony and two other men who made it clear he wasn't leaving without permission. He looked worse than the last time I'd seen him. Thinner, skin sallow, eyes bloodshot. The smell of alcohol clung to him even from across the room. Valentina met him in the formal sitting room. Julian watched from the doorway, arms crossed. I stood behind him, Riley safely upstairs with one of the house staff Valentina trusted. "Christopher," Valentina said, voice breaking. "Tell me they're wrong. Tell me you didn't help those men take that little girl." Christopher laughed bitterly. "Which girl? The one Julian replaced Sophia with? The child he parades around like our daughter never existed? Riley is not a replacement." Valentina's voice shook. "She's a little girl who needed protection. And what about Sophia? What about my daughter?" Christopher's voice rose. "Where was Julian's protection when she needed it? Where was this family when she was dying on a restaurant floor? That wasn't Julian's fault," Valentina said desperately. "The Russians attacked because Julian refused to negotiate, because his pride was more important than compromise." Christopher turned his bloodshot gaze to Julian. "You killed her, brother. As surely as if you'd pulled the trigger yourself." Julian's expression didn't change, but I saw his hands curl into fists. "So you decided to make him feel the same pain," I said, unable to stay silent, "by terrorizing a 5-year-old girl who had nothing to do with what happened to Sophia." Christopher's eyes found me. "You don't understand. None of you do. He needs to know what it's like, to be helpless, to watch someone you love disappear and know you can't save them. But he did save her." My voice was cold. "Which means your plan failed. All you accomplished was proving you're exactly as broken as everyone feared." "Megan," Julian said quietly, "but I was done being polite to the man who'd put my daughter through hell. You want to punish Julian? Fine. That's between you two. But you used my daughter to do it. You allied with the men who killed your own child just to hurt your brother. That's not grief, Christopher. That's evil." Christopher lunged toward me, rage twisting his features. Julian moved faster than I'd ever seen him move, intercepting his brother, slamming him against the wall with one hand around his throat. "Don't," Julian said, voice arctic. "Don't even breathe in her direction." Anthony and the other men moved in, but Valentina raised a hand, stopping them. "Giuliano," she said quietly, "let him go." Julian released Christopher, who slumped against the wall, gasping. Valentina approached her younger son, cupping his face in her hands. "I love you. I have always loved you. But what you did, I cannot forgive. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Tears streamed down Christopher's face. "Mama, no." She stepped back. "You are my son. You will always be my son. But you are not welcome in this house until you make this right. However long that takes. Where am I supposed to go?" Julian pulled out an envelope, threw it at Christopher's feet. "Plane ticket. Apartment address in London. Money to live on for 6 months. After that, you're on your own. You're exiling me. I'm letting you live." Julian's voice was flat. "That's more mercy than you deserve. If it were anyone but Mama asking, you'd already be in the ground." Christopher bent to pick up the envelope with shaking hands. He looked at each of us in turn, lingering on Valentina, before Anthony escorted him out. The moment the door closed, Valentina collapsed into a chair. Decades of strength finally crumbling. I moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry he hurt your daughter. You're not responsible for his choices. But I am his mother. I raised him. Where did I fail so badly that he became this?" Julian knelt in front of her, taking her other hand. "You didn't fail, Mama. Christopher failed himself. He chose grief over healing, chose revenge over family. That's not your fault." Valentina pulled both of us close, holding on like we were lifelines in a storm. Later, after Valentina had gone to rest, and Julian had disappeared to handle whatever aftermath came from exiling his brother, I found myself in the garden. Riley played on the grass nearby, laughing as a puppy Valentina kept chased her in circles. Normal child sounds, so at odds with the violence surrounding us. Anthony appeared at my side. "Ms. Collins." "Megan," I corrected automatically. "Megan." He nodded. Boss wanted me to tell you the threat level just dropped significantly. With Christopher gone and the Russians scattered, you're considerably safer, but not completely safe. No, his honesty was refreshing. Kozlov's still out there, but he's weakened. Lost his inside source, lost his men, lost his leverage. He'll rebuild, but it'll take time. Months, maybe longer. Long enough to feel like we can breathe again? That's up to you to decide. Anthony glanced at Riley. For what it's worth, I've worked for Julian for 8 years. Seen him lose people, gain people, make hard calls most men couldn't live with. And I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you and your daughter. What way is that? Like he'd burn the world down if it meant keeping you safe. Anthony's expression was unreadable. Just thought you should know. He walked away, leaving me to watch Riley play and wonder how I'd gotten here. How a chance encounter in a cafe had led to this moment where a Mafia boss's protection felt less like a cage and more like home. The answer scared me more than the danger ever had, because somewhere along the way, I'd stopped wanting to leave. 3 months passed in a blur of domesticity I'd never expected to experience. Riley thrived at her new private school, making friends and laughing again. Her nightmares came less frequently, and when they did, she'd pad down the hallway to where Julian worked late, climbing into his lap until the fear passed. I'd converted the mansion's sunroom into a photography studio, taking on select clients while building a portfolio that actually reflected my skill rather than desperation. Money was no longer a constant source of panic. And Julian. Julian was everywhere and nowhere, always present even when business took him away for days at a time. We hadn't discussed what we were to each other, hadn't labeled the way his hand found my lower back when we walked together, or how I'd started waiting up for him when he worked late, how Riley called him Julian, but meant something closer to Dad. It was easier not to name it. Safer. Ryan's custody case had dissolved without trial. His lawyers withdrew after Victoria Hale presented evidence of his violent history that somehow kept multiplying. Julian's doing, undoubtedly, though he'd never admitted it. The Russians remained quiet. No attacks, no threats, no sign of Kozlov beyond intelligence reports that placed him somewhere in Eastern Europe, licking his wounds. Life felt almost normal. Almost. I knew it couldn't last. The realization came on a Tuesday afternoon. Riley was at school, I was editing wedding photos, and Julian was supposedly handling business at the port. But something felt wrong, a tension in the air that reminded me of the days before the kidnapping. My phone buzzed. Julian's name on the screen. Come to my office. Now. No explanation. No pleasantries. Just command. The kind he used when situations were critical. I found him standing at the windows overlooking the garden, shoulders tight with tension. Anthony stood nearby, along with 2 men I recognized from Julian's security team. What's wrong? I asked. Julian turned, and the look on his face made my blood run cold. Kozlov is dead. I blinked. That's good news, isn't it? The threat's eliminated. It would be. Except he didn't die from natural causes. Julian pulled up something on his computer, turned the monitor so I could see. Grainy security footage showed a man slumped in a chair, blood pooling beneath him. He was executed. Professional hit, clean and efficient. 2 days ago in Prague. Who killed him? That's the question. Julian's jaw was tight, because whoever did it left a calling card. He zoomed in on the image. On the wall behind Kozlov's body, someone had spray-painted a symbol, a crown over crossed swords. What does it mean? I asked. It's the mark of the Bellini family. Italian organized crime, based in Naples, but with operations throughout Europe. Julian rubbed his face tiredly. They're old school, powerful, and they don't make moves without strategic purpose. Why would they kill Kozlov? That's what I need to figure out. He looked at Anthony. Has there been any communication? Nothing direct, but word on the street is the Bellinis are consolidating territory. They've been moving against Russian interests across Europe for the past 6 months. And now they've made a statement by taking out one of the most connected Russian operators in the game. Julian's voice was grim. Which means they're sending a message. To who? I asked, though dread was already settling in my stomach. Julian's eyes met mine. To me. The Bellinis know about the conflict with Kozlov. They know he targeted my family. By killing him, they're either offering alliance or announcing their intention to fill the power vacuum he left. How do you know which? I don't. Yet, he turned back to Anthony. Increase security at all properties. Double the guards on Riley's school. And find out everything you can about Bellini movements in the US over the past year. After Anthony left, Julian moved to pour himself a drink from the crystal decanter on his desk. His hands were steady, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. This never stops, does it? I said quietly. One threat ends, another begins. No, it doesn't. He took a sip, staring at nothing. This is my world, Megan. It's always been this way, and you want us to stay in it. I want you to be safe. He turned to face me. Whether that's with me or somewhere far away where my enemies can't use you as leverage. Either way, I'll make sure you're protected. The offer hung between us, carefully neutral. He was giving me an out, a chance to walk away before the next crisis hit. I should have taken it. Should have grabbed Riley and run to somewhere quiet, where mafia politics and territorial disputes couldn't reach us. Instead, I crossed the room to where Julian stood. What if I don't want to leave? His expression shifted, hope and fear warring on his face. Then you need to understand what that means. The danger doesn't end. Every choice I make creates enemies. Every alliance I forge comes with complications. You and Riley will always be potential targets. We're already targets. I reached up, touching his face. We have been since that first night in the cafe. Walking away now doesn't erase what these people know about us. I can relocate you. New identities, new life. Somewhere they'd never think to look. And never see you again? The words came out more vulnerable than I'd intended. Never watch Riley learn Italian from you? Or see Valentina spoil her with pastries? Just disappear and pretend none of this happened? You'd be alive. Safe. We'd be alone. I held his gaze. Riley's lost enough already. She lost her father to violence and substance abuse. Lost the only home she'd known when we fled. Now she's finally found stability. Found family. You want me to rip that away from her? I want her to grow up. His voice broke slightly. To have a future that isn't overshadowed by my choices. Then make different choices. The solution seemed so simple in my mind. You've consolidated territory, eliminated threats, established dominance. What if instead of always preparing for the next war, you worked toward actual peace? Julian laughed bitterly. Peace isn't possible in my world. Why not? Because no one's tried? Or because trying means admitting you're tired of the violence? The words landed like a physical blow. Julian set down his glass, hands gripping the desk edge. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. My father spent his entire life building what I now control. He died defending it. My sister was murdered by rivals who saw weakness. Sophia, Christopher's daughter, caught in crossfire from a war I could have prevented. Every person I've loved has paid the price for this world. And you think I'll be next? I moved closer. Or Riley. That's why you keep giving me chances to leave? Yes. What if we choose to stay anyway? What if we decide you're worth the risk? Julian's dark eyes held mine, and I saw everything he'd been holding back. The fear, the longing, the desperate hope that maybe this time it could be different. Megan. The office door burst open. Anthony stood there, phone in hand, expression urgent. Boss, we've got a situation. A courier just delivered this to the front gate. He held up an envelope, expensive cream paper with a wax seal. The symbol pressed into the wax was unmistakable. A crown over crossed swords. Julian took the envelope, broke the seal, pulled out a single card. His expression went carefully blank as he read. What does it say? I asked. It's an invitation. He handed me the card. To a meeting. Tonight. At the Bellini family's estate upstate. I read the elegant script. It says they wish to discuss matters of mutual interest regarding territorial arrangements and future cooperation. It's a power play. Julian took the card back. They've eliminated my enemy. Now they want to negotiate how we divide the spoils. Are you going? I have to. Refusing would be seen as weakness, an invitation for them to move against me directly. He looked at Anthony. Full security detail. I want routes scouted, exits identified, backup teams staged within 5 minutes of the location. Already on it, Anthony replied. After he left, Julian turned to me. I need you to take Riley and go to the safe house in Connecticut. Anthony will drive you. Leave within the hour. No, he blinked. This isn't a discussion. You're right, it's not. I crossed my arms. You don't get to send us away every time there's danger. If we're doing this, if we're really staying, then we deal with it together. Megan, these people are potentially your new allies, according to that invitation. So go to your meeting. Do your negotiation. Come home safe. I softened slightly. We'll be here when you get back. Riley and I will have dinner with Valentina, watch a movie, be completely normal. Show these Bellini people that you have something worth fighting for beyond territory and pride. Julian stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he pulled me against him, arms wrapping tight. When did you become so brave? He murmured against my hair. The day I realized running wasn't keeping us safe. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. So go. Handle your business. Then come back and tell me how it went. And if it goes badly, then Anthony will get us to safety while you burn everything down. I managed a small smile. I'm learning how your world works. He kissed me then, fierce and desperate and full of things we hadn't said aloud. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were bright. I love you, he said simply. I've loved you since you sat across from me in that cafe and trusted me with your daughter's safety. Tears blurred my vision. I love you too. So don't do anything stupid tonight. Define stupid. Anything that prevents you from coming home to us. He kissed me once more, quickly, then pulled away. I'll be back before midnight. Anthony stays here with you. Marco and his team will accompany me. After Julian left, I found Riley and Valentina in the kitchen making cookies. My daughter's hands were covered in flour, her laugh bright and free. Where's Julian? She asked when she saw me. Business meeting. He'll be back later. I ruffled her hair. How about we have a movie night? Popcorn and everything? Riley's eyes lit up. Can we watch the princess movie? Whatever you want, baby. As Valentina helped Riley wash her hands, the older woman caught my eye. She knew something was happening, could read the tension I was trying to hide. He'll come back, she said quietly. Julian always comes back. How can you be so sure? Valentina smiled. Because now he has a reason that matters more than pride or territory. He has you. He has Riley. He has family again. The hours crawled by. We watched the movie, ate too much popcorn, and Riley eventually fell asleep curled against my side. I carried her up to bed, tucked her in, and then returned to the living room where Valentina had made tea. He should have called by now, I said, checking my phone for the 20th time. These things take time. Valentina poured tea with steady hands. Negotiations, posturing, establishing dominance. It's all part of the dance. At 11:43, headlights swept across the windows. I was at the door before the car stopped, relief flooding through me when Julian emerged uninjured. He looked tired but triumphant. When he saw me waiting, his expression softened into something that made my heart skip. It's done, he said, pulling me into his arms. The Bellinis want an alliance. They'll control European operations while I maintain U.S. territory. No conflict, no competition. They even offered intelligence on remaining Russian cells. So we're safe? Safer. There will always be risks, but this takes the biggest threat off the table. He cupped my face in his hands. I told them about you, about Riley. Made it clear that harming my family would mean total war. What did they say? That family is sacred. That they respect a man who puts his people first. Julian smiled slightly. I think they were surprised I admitted to having someone I care about more than power. Are you surprised you admitted it? No. He kissed my forehead. I've known for months. I was just waiting for you to be ready to hear it. Later, after Valentina had gone to bed and the house had settled into quiet, Julian and I stood in the garden under stars that somehow seemed brighter than before. What happens now? I asked. Now we live. He pulled me closer. We raise Riley. We build something that isn't just about survival. We prove that it's possible to exist in this world without letting it consume everything good. You really think we can do that? With you? Yes. He tilted my chin up. You walked into my life by accident and changed everything. Made me remember what I was fighting for beyond territory and revenge. And what's that? This. You, Riley, Valentina, Anthony. Family. The kind worth dying for, and more importantly, the kind worth living for. I kissed him under the stars, tasting promise and hope, and the beginning of something I'd thought impossible. We weren't safe. We'd never be completely safe. But we were together. We were choosing this. And that was its own kind of victory. When we finally went inside, I checked on Riley one more time. She slept peacefully, blonde curls spread across her pillow, secure in the knowledge that she was protected and loved. Julian appeared in the doorway behind me, watching with an expression that held everything he'd been too careful to show before. She's ours, I said quietly. However this started, whatever brought us together, she's yours now as much as mine. I know. His voice was rough with emotion. From the moment I saw her shivering in that cafe, I knew I'd protect her. I just didn't realize I'd end up loving both of you. We stood there together, watching Riley sleep, and I understood that this was what mattered. Not the danger, not the violence, not the complicated politics of Julian's world. This moment, this family we'd built from chance and necessity and choice. It wasn't the ending I'd expected when I walked into that cafe 3 months ago, desperate and alone. It was better.